Thank you very much, Dr. Ahrens. I appreciate very much your message that you delivered to us. By the way, Dr. Ahrens and I were neighbors in South York some years ago. We continue on our program and some remarks. Next I come on Mrs. Malka Robin. Mrs. Kozik, the wife of sorry, she's not well. And Mr. Shai Sinod, Associates of Hollywood Survivors. Are you here?
We'll see, we'll look for him. Is Mr. Chillock here?
If not, we'll come on Jonathan Rosenblum from America, and everybody knows Jonathan, reads his column at the Jerusalem Post. There's a suggestion that we have a break and let people eat dinner. Very democratic. How many are in favor of making a break? How many are opposed to making a break? The noes have it. Okay. I know that the people want to stay in this to go home. Okay, let's proceed there. Let's say Jonathan is most of you people know, he writes well, he speaks well, and a very enjoyable column every Friday for Shabbat. If you haven't heard it up to now, why did you Post and read the column? Go ahead, John.
I've been asked to speak briefly, and I will. But I want to capture just one aspect of Hillel Kook's legacy, which I think deserves to be highlighted. This group of young Palestinians, Palestinian Jews who came to America, was a highly ideological group. They had strong opinions, they came with a very definite purpose, they came with the purpose of creating a Jewish army. At the same time, when they first found out of the destruction, the extermination campaigns that were being carried out in Poland, they put aside everything. There was no other consideration on their agenda besides the rescue of the Jews in Europe. No ideological considerations were allowed to take place from that point forward. They were ready to work together with every group within the mainstream establishment in America, and there was no response. At every step of the way, as Dr. Ahrens just said, they were opposed. We Will Never Die played in 6 cities to audiences of over 100,000, including the First Lady, members of Congress, most of the ambassadorial corps, and then it was stopped. Why? Because the mainline Zionist organizations opposed to the revisionists threatened sponsors of the pageant in every city if they would continue their sponsorship, and it was never shown again from that point onward. The most effective instrument to that point for calling attention to the plight of Jewry in America, of Jewry in Europe. In August of 1943, almost a year after the first news and confirmation of that extermination campaign was publicized, at the conference, the American Jewish Conference of 34 major organizations, the revisionists, the Bergsonites were excluded. The only ones pushing for their inclusion were their Orthodox allies. Hillel Kook himself said he couldn't believe it. He went to the opening of that conference assuming that the major item on the agenda would be the saving of Jews in Europe. And he walked out in disgust. It was barely on the agenda. Every resolution of that conference dealt with the creation of a post-war Jewish state in Palestine. The saving of Jews in Europe was completely off the agenda. In December of that year, when the Bergsonites initiative, a rescue resolution was introduced into Congress, calling for the United States government to commit itself to the rescue of Jews in Europe. Stephen Weiss and the rest of the American Jewish Zionist leadership opposed that. They knew that if they demanded that it would be attached to a resolution for a post-war Jewish state, the resolution would be defeated, and they demanded that nevertheless. At that time, senators said it was impossible to go into the hearings. Christian senators, without being accosted by the leaders of American Jewry to tell them the Bergsonites do not speak for American Jewry, we are not in favor of this resolution. And yet, if it would not have been for the threat, the possibility that the threat that resolution would have passed, the War Refugee Board would never have come into existence, and another 200,000 Jews would probably have been lost. In all of this, the Bergsonites had one ally amongst American Jewry, and that was the Orthodox community. And for the same reason, they shared the same attitude. Rav Aaron Kotler, the leader of the Vad Hatzalah, once said, with respect to ransom programs initiated by Rav Michal Ber Weissmandel in Europe, the Sternbachs and others, which were opposed by the mainstream Jewish leadership and the Jewish Agency and the Joint Distribution Committee in Europe and in America, if it would save the fingernail on one Jewish child, I would negotiate with the devil himself. When in 1944 there was a possibility of extricating 1,600 Jews from Theresienstadt, and the Swiss Zionist organization started publicizing, why are we trying to save them? Many of them are mushmatim. They've converted to Christianity. Again, it was Rav Aaron Kotler who said, a Jew is a Jew is a Jew. The most Orthodox elements in American society were the ones who were most prepared to fight to save even the Mishumarim from Theresienstadt. They worked together with Hillel Kook at every step. Hillel Kook originally believed, it was, first of all, it was Rabbi Jacob Rosenheim, the head of the World Aguda organization, who first brought to Peter Bergson or Hillel Kook's attention, revealed to him what was taking place in Poland. That led to their casting aside all interest with the Jewish army, putting aside any relationship with the Irgun and with the revisionists in Palestine, and working exclusively on the emergency campaign for the saving of the Jewish people in Europe. Later, it was the Orthodox who tried to bring the Bergsonites into the American Jewish Conference so that they would be participants there. But the most crucial aspect of that relationship was in October 6, 1943, 2 days before Yom Kippur, when 400 Orthodox rabbis marched the first public outcry against the Roosevelt administration to Washington. Hillel Kook planned this march. They worked together. Hillel Kook had originally dreamed that there would be 5,000 clergymen of all faiths and of all Jewish streams. But no one besides the Orthodox would join him. Had they joined him at that time, President Roosevelt, at the advice of his Jewish advisor, Judge Samuel Rosenblum, couldn't have said, who advised them, it's just a bunch of old European rabbis, you can ignore them, wouldn't have gone up to give medals to a group of Yugoslavian soldiers that day and refused to greet those 400 rabbis. But it made a tremendous impression. Again, 2 months later, when the rescue resolution was introduced, there was one ally for the Bergsonites. And again, it was the Orthodox community that were his exclusive allies. Anybody who was interested in the story, anyone who was interested in the story of Hillel Kook must know this book. By the late Louis Rappaport, Shake Heaven and Earth, Peter Bergson's Struggle to Rescue the Jews of Europe, as well as this book, A Race Against Death, Peter Bergson, America and the Holocaust, which just recently came out. Rappaport writes here that, again, and shockingly with respect to the rescue resolution, again, the only allies that were found in the entire Jewish community of America were the Orthodox rabbis of Agudas Israel and the Agudas Rabbanim of rabbis of the United States and Canada. Wyman's conclusion is the same. He asked Hillel Kook in the interviews that are conducted and form the bulk of this book, how do you explain that the Orthodox were your only allies? And Kook told him, describing his relationship with the rabbis of the Ba'al Hatzalah, he said, because they believed and lived according to the Talmudic dictum that he who saves a single life is considered as if he had saved an entire world. Towards the end of his life, Hillel Kook was interviewed by the famous historian Lucy Davidovich, author of Destruction of European Jewry. And she asked him, tell me, why were you different? And he replied to her, first tell me why all the rest were different. Last night I was speaking on the phone to Dr. David Kranzler, the preeminent historian of Orthodox rescue work and author of books on, most recently on George Mantello, the El Salvadorian representative legate in Geneva, a book called The Man Who Stopped the Trains to Auschwitz. And Kranzler told me, Dr. Kranzler told me, that he took up this subject again with Hillel Kook. And he said to him, that answer is a cute answer, and maybe it was good enough for Lucy Davidovich. But that's not the reason. The reason you were different is because you learned the first 18, you learned till you were 18 in Merkaz Arab. The reason that you were different is because you were the nephew of Rav Kook. The reason that you were different is because you were raised with that attitude that nothing is more important than the saving of every Jewish life. And Kook said to him, you're right.
Should mention that there were others too who tried to help and help. Dr. Zora Warhamter, for example, was influential together with the Japanese council to save thousands of Jews from both and the Japan and into China. This was one of the other life-saving operations. But Jonathan is correct. Unfortunately, there was disunity, and it shouldn't have been. And people didn't know what to do. I lived through that period, and it was a terribly confusing period. Bergson came, others came as well, Hillel Kook, and helped to save the day. But this is in 1944. All of this sort of started in 1940. For some 2-3 years, nothing was done, absolutely nothing.